Political Idiots. I'm your host, Katie Halper.
I'm the other host, Aaron Mate.
How's it going, Aaron?
Not bad. Not bad. How are you?
Good. You know, my turtleneck is like falling in a weird way that it makes it look like my chin is like crooked, because like you can't really tell where the chin begins and the neck ends. So
that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I wonder if the original turtleneck concept designer factored that in.
Yeah, could have anticipated that. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good. I got this shirt. I can say that it's the only reason I'm going to say it's Calvin Klein is because it's from the Salvation Army. So I feel comfortable saying that. So it should
according
be
to societal
designed.
rules, you're allowed to disclose the brand if you bought it from the Salvation.
Oh my God, that rhymes.
Yeah.
You're allowed to say the brand if you bought it from a Salvation. I didn't know that. So that's like the official nickname for it, because I know that that's what we call it in my household.
Yeah, that's what we call it in my household too.
Oh wow.
So either
that's why we get along.
Either it's only exclusive to our respective households, or that's the official nickname.
Right. It's a Mate. It could be a Mate Halper lore.
I did change my hairstyle as a result of internet bullying via this show.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I'll come out and admit that. Yeah, the comments, just the nonstop comments making fun of me for having bangs. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went to the barber and I was like, "Listen, these bangs have got to go." And
wow.
He complied. Anyway, the point is, internet bullying works, everybody. So just keep at it. Whatever your cause is, keep on bullying on the internet.
Yeah, keep on bullying. And if Aaron grows back his bangs, you'll know he's regained a sense of self. That's how you'll know, yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, we got the 4 food groups. Should we get to it?
Yeah, let's do it. So I got Democrat suck. And this week, sometimes we do this. We don't do official Democrats, but we do kind of like de facto Democrats or Democrats media, blue state media.
De facto Dems.
De facto Dems, yeah, exactly. So we're going to watch a clip from The Hill, because even, Anna Navarro, who we'll see, who's the daughter of a Contra, she's part of the resistance. She was a Republican. I don't know if she's left the party, but as you'll see, Whoopi obviously is a Democrat. And so I just think of The View, even though they always have some like token right-winger. I don't even remember who it is now, but they're pretty blue state media. So let's hear what they had to say.
All. And look, I think that's an incredibly relevant question. Yeah. And I think DOJ, in the same way that it is setting up a task force to investigate oligarchs, should look into people who are Russian propagandists and shilling for Putin. That's being, if you are a foreign asset to a dictator, it should be investigated. In fact, I remember when Tulsi Gabbard, and I even hate that we're discussing it, because I think to myself, who is this woman? She's she's no longer in Congress. She's a failed presidential candidate. Yeah. She only practically exists on Twitter, and the fact that we're giving her oxygen is what makes her relevant, that we're talking about her on hot topics. But on the other hand, how do you not call out something that is repeating false Russian propaganda and that has been brought down?
They used to arrest people for doing stuff like this. If they thought you were colluding with a Russian agent, if they thought you were putting out information or taking information and handing over to Russia, they used to actually investigate stuff like this. And I guess now, there seems to be no bars. And people are not being told to hate Putin. Putin doesn't need a reason to be hated. It's pretty much clear.
He started a war.
He started an unnecessary war.
But this is kind of like, isn't this contributing to the death?
Okay, so this starts out, they're talking about Tucker Carlson being pro-Putin, and then they transition to Tulsi Gabbard. And then they say that Putin no one needs to tell people why to hate Putin. He started a war, genocide. So Sunny is now saying it's genocide. I haven't heard anyone we've heard a lot of Nazi comparisons. We've heard the thesis of which is basically like Putin, worse than Hitler. But I haven't heard anyone accuse him of genocide. But Sunny, who is considered an authority on genocide, has deemed that it's genocide. But what I like is that Whoopi Goldberg is like reminiscent for a time when people were arrested if you thought they were working with the Russians. And I think she needs to go further. There was a time when you could be executed, like the Rosenbergs. Why not bring that back?
Or put into internment camps, like Japanese.
Internment camps, right. Yeah, exactly.
During the Second World War.
So I think Whoopi, it's like go big or go home. Include the internment camps, include the executions of couples when you know that you are accusing them of trumped up charges. I mean, Julius was involved with the Soviet Union, not to the extent that they said he was, and they definitely knew that Ethel was not involved to the extent that she was, and they tried to use her as leverage, but they didn't. She didn't cooperate, and so they were killed. The Rosenbergs at Sing Sing in the electric chair.
I love what's her name? Ana Navarro, is that her name?
Yeah.
The Contra lady.
Yeah.
She's saying like, who is Tulsi Gabbard? She's a nobody. She's a failed presidential candidate. There's a lot of failed presidential candidates.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris is a failed presidential
True.
candidate. She got even less votes than Tulsi Gabbard did. She had to drop out earlier than Tulsi did. Tulsi's also a U.S. veteran, and just the way people can smear her, is just it shows how little respect these people actually have when they talk about how much they have to support the troops and worship the troops, except for when they're people like Tulsi Gabbard who dissents on some key issues from the party line. Then they're foreign assets who deserve to be investigated. And the irony, the double irony of Ana Navarro doing it is that her father was a Contra, the terror army that, was used for a dirty war against Nicaragua in the 1980s to overthrow the Sandinista government.
Right.
And she also herself was a paid foreign lobbyist, foreign agent for the government of El Salvador, a very right-wing, corrupt government of El Salvador. And while the people of El Salvador were left impoverished, she made a lot of money from that, something that Tulsi Gabbard has never done. Yeah. So it's just what can you say about these people, Katie? What can you say? It's just they never feel to stun me.
They're yearning for the days of McCarthyism.
Yes, they are.
Which I guess for Navarro is less surprising than it is for Whoopi, but Whoopi's made some questionable statements over her, over her career.
Yeah, I mean I mean this is where the View probably plays an outsized role in our culture. I think we can all agree on that. Yeah. The View probably is more influential and more of a presence in our lives than maybe it deserves to be.
It's just so embarrassing. She first said there was a time when if you thought that people were working with the Russians, if you thought people were colluding, you'd arrest them. She skips over then she says you investigate. But first, what she's really hungry for is just going from thinking to arresting.
By the way, there was a time when Vladimir Putin was a favorite in Washington because there was hope back then that he would be an obedient client like Boris Yeltsin was when Boris Yeltsin was getting drunk and letting U.S. hedge fund managers pillage his country and create oligarchs. But there was a time when George Bush said he looked into Vladimir Putin's soul, right? Yeah. And he saw good in Vladimir Putin's soul.
He looked into.
So should George Bush be rounded up and arrested for treason for once giving aid and comfort to the enemy of Vladimir Putin?
Yeah.
I certainly do. I mean, I don't think Putin is Hitler, but I never would say that the guy's got a good soul. I would never claim that.
I don't know if there's a soul there. He's not the most soulful person. Yeah.
He's definitely not the most soulful person. No.
Yes, that's my Democrat suck.
All right. Well, for Republican suck, we have to for Republican suck, it's difficult because what is a Republican now? You have such a wide spectrum. You have the Mitt Romney crowd, traditional Republican. Mitt Romney, of course, wanted a Cold War with Russia. He was once mocked for that by Democrats, but now Democrats are worshiping his feet and saying that we should apologize to him for daring to question the wisdom of having a new Cold War with Russia. But then you have the MAGA crowd who are not down with the Mitt Romney crowd on so many things like Russia, but then are crazy, even crazier on other matters. So there's full spectrum Republican suck, and we got to do the full spectrum today. So let's start with Mitt Romney, who had something to say about Tulsi Gabbard, just like the hosts of The View, where after Tulsi Gabbard talked about her concern over the potential of there being biological weapons labs inside Ukraine, the potential. She wasn't saying that there are for sure, but she's saying that it's a concern now that Victoria Nuland had those comments before Congress where she was asked whether or not Ukraine has biological or chemical weapons, and Nuland did not give a direct denial. She instead said that she was concerned that Russia could seize Ukraine's biological labs and use it, which just raised a whole series of concerns. So that's what Tulsi Gabbard was raising. Right. And so Mitt Romney responds by saying, Tulsi Gabbard is parroting false Russian propaganda. Her treasonous lies may well cost lives.
Rhymes.
It does rhyme. It does rhyme, Mitt. So let's give him propers for that, actually.
Yeah, I'll give him that.
Her treasonous lies may well cost lives. That's, you can't argue with that rhyme.
You can't argue
with that.
Pretty good. Poetry, yeah.
Yeah. Rhymes are very convincing. Like when Johnny Cochran did "If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit." Like,
yeah, that was good.
It's hard to argue with that when you find a rhyme. So that's pretty much the same device that Mitt Romney is doing here.
Right.
Her treasonous lies may cost lives.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. And calling a member of the armed forces who served many duties in Iraq. Meanwhile, Mitt Romney skipped the Vietnam War. All 5 of his sons skipped military service, didn't serve in Iraq. And Glenn Greenwald pointed this out, I think, that Mitt Romney, when he was asked about how his sons have served their country, if they haven't sacrificed, by going to war, he said they served by getting him elected.
I mean, it's true. That is a major contribution to this country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you, Romney sons. Thank you, Romney sons, whatever your names are, Tig, Tug. Thank you for your service in getting your father elected.
Yeah.
And which I'm sure was purely selfless on your parts and will have no material benefits in your personal lives, just like every other kid of a famous politician.
Yeah. Totally selfless. Yeah. Like giving up your life.
Let's actually stay on the Romney end. I just thought this was so funny.
Yeah.
This is Elliot Cohen, also on the Romney end. He is a Bush Republican. He served under the Bush administration, was an advisor to Condoleezza Rice while she was Secretary of State. And check out what he said about Ukraine. We're waging a proxy war against Russia, and rightly so. Time to face up to what that implies, because Putin and the Russians are a lot weaker and the Ukrainians a lot stronger than they look. My latest in The Atlantic. Of course, that's in The Atlantic, the official journal of neocon propaganda. That's why Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief, is the guy who gave us stories in The New Yorker claiming that Saddam Hussein was working with Al-Qaeda. And that's why David Frum, a Bush administration speechwriter who coined the axis of evil phrase, that's why he's also a top columnist at The Atlantic. So, of course, Elliot Cohen is writing that in The Atlantic, but props to him for being honest and admitting what Ukraine is really being used for, which is to wage, quote, a proxy war against Russia.
Yeah, thanks for saying the quiet part out loud, right? I mean, Adam Schiff kind of went there when he said we're fighting Russia over there, so we don't fight them over here, but he didn't lay it out as a proxy war the way this guy did, so I want to thank him.
He didn't say the words were proxy war, so proper's Elliot for pointing that out. And proper's also for blocking me after I quoted you, after I pointed out on Twitter that he had said that he blocked me immediately. Even though I was thanking him for being honest, I was appreciating his honesty.
He's modest. He doesn't know how to take a compliment.
Yes, he's too modest. Yes.
Like some people blush, and maybe blocking someone is like the equivalent of saying, "Oh, stop it," and blushing.
All right, so turning to the other side of the Republican spectrum, let's go to MAGA land and hear from a guy who goes by the initials of DJT.
Anything. Getting critical race theory out of our schools is not just a matter of values, it's also a matter of national survival. We have no choice. The fate of any nation ultimately depends upon the willingness of its citizens to lay down, and they must do this, lay down their very lives to defend their country. If we allow the Marxists and communists and socialists to teach our children to hate America, there will be no one left to defend our flag or to protect our great country or its freedom.
Wow.
So props to producer Wilson for finding this clip, bringing it to our attention. And Katie, if you hear that, to defend the country, according to Trump, we have to lay down our lives to protect the country from critical race theory being taught in schools.
Yeah, it's an existential threat. Every time critical race theory is taught, an American loses its wings. Yeah.
And that's the Republican spectrum. On the one side, you have the Trumpers saying, like, we have to lay down our lives to protect ourselves from critical race theory. The other side, you have Romney and Elliot Cohen, those people saying, Lindsey Graham saying, we have to lay down the lives of Ukrainians to use them as cannon fodder against Russia. So everywhere, someone has to sacrifice, whether it's Ukrainians in a proxy war against Russia or Americans somehow in a war against critical race theory.
Or don't forget the sons of Mitt Romney, who also have to sacrifice.
Yes. Yes. Right. And they can sacrifice by helping their father get reelected.
Right. Yeah. By putting elbow grease into their father's campaign.
Exactly.
Which is almost like giving up your life.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we go to Isn't That Weird?
Yes.
By the way, I'm so hot in this shirt. It's kind of a sweater. Not to dwell on this sweater, but I got to change out of this. And I don't want people to think that when they see my costume change, that's because we're futzing around the neck chin issue. It's just too hot.
Gotcha.
It's
So
very
this is
warm.
everybody. This is not neck chin related.
I don't give into internet bullying, which obviously couldn't have happened yet because we didn't release this. But I'll be right back in a cooler top. 1 second. All right. So isn't that weird? So this is a really fascinating story. Let's go to the ABC News story. If we could just show that, Wilson, please. All right. Police. Woman stabbed date in revenge of Iranians killing. Police say a woman stabbed her date whom she had met online in retaliation for the 2020 death of an Iranian military leader killed in an American drone strike. Of course, that's Soleimani. Major tragedy there. Very handsome man. Also did a lot of good for the world. So let's reading the article. A woman stabbed her date whom she had met online in retaliation for the 2020 death of an Iranian military leader killed in an American drone strike, police said. Nika Nikubin, 21, has been charged with attempted murder, battery with a deadly weapon, and burglary. Nikubian and the man met online on a dating website, Henderson police wrote in an arrest report, and apparently it was plenty of fish, by the way, so be careful if you're on that website. They don't do very good vetting, apparently. The pair then agreed to meet at Sunset Station Hotel on March 5th, renting a room together. While in the room, the pair began having sex when Nikubin put a blindfold on the man, police said. Nikubin then turned off the lights, and several minutes later, the man felt a, quote, felt a pain on the side of his neck, end quote, KLAS reported. Nikubin reportedly stabbed the man in the neck, quote, for revenge against U.S. troops for the killing of Qasem Soleimani in 2020, police wrote in a report. And then they fill in the article. U.S. forces killed Soleimani, a top general in Iran's military, in a drone strike in January 2020. Soleimani headed the expeditionary Quds Force of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. He responsible for the Islamic Republic's foreign operations. He gained prominence for advising Shiite paramilitary forces fighting the Islamic State group in Iraq before it was defeated in 2017. After the stabbing, the man pushed Nikubin off of him and ran out of the room to call 911, police said. She also ran out of the room telling a hotel employee that she had just stabbed a man. When talking to the police, Nikubin told investigators she wanted revenge. And, this is interesting, Aaron, I wonder if you could guess what song she said she was inspired by. She said she listened to a song which gave her the motivation to carry out her revenge. Guess what song it was?
I have no idea what could possibly...
idea.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, it's not, in fact, you'll probably know the lyrics. Maybe you could try to figure it out. But it's Gravedigger. She gives me money. Wait, what is it?
Oh, no. You're thinking of Gold Digger.
Oh, my God. Okay. That's why I was so confused. That's Gold Digger.
It's Gold Digger. No, yeah, not Gravedigger. So this song here, she was listening to Gravedigger.
All right. What song is that? That's different. I was
idea.
thinking of the Kanye song about a gold digger. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, I think Gravedigger is, there's a theme song. I don't know. It's a song by Dave Matthews. What? From his solo album, Some Devil.
Well, I've never liked Dave Matthews, so I'm feeling very vindicated. But I do want to allow that possibly this was some other song, Yeah,
we don't know which one it is.
They don't say the artist there,
No, they
right?
don't say the artist, right.
Yeah.
Which is highly irresponsible. And now I will take the L for that was my fault. The gold digger thing, that was my fault. I just misread
what's funny is if it's not the Dave Matthews song, then the outlets ABC's being very mean to Dave Matthews because now people are going to think that Dave Matthews song played a role in this awful incident.
Right. And, that's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's crazy. That's a crazy story.
Yeah, that's weird, right? So I mean,
very weird.
Look, we knew there'd be blowback for Soleimani's killing.
Yeah.
We didn't anticipate it would come in this form.
Yeah, well, it's an example of just why the U.S. shouldn't be assassinating people.
Right, the blowback.
It can create all sorts of blowback. A few days ago, Iran launched missiles or Iranian-backed forces launched missiles at a U.S. facility in Iraq, which they said was an Israeli training facility, in apparent revenge for Soleimani's death. There's all sorts of consequences of that assassination that will continue for many years because Iran has vowed to take revenge. And this is on a very micro level, an individual example of that, someone who felt aggrieved by that and doing something horrific to take what she thought was revenge. And some guy out there was the victim. It's awful.
It's awful.
And very weird and very appropriate for
and very weird, yeah.
All right. So for Isn't That Terrible, we're going to make the Isn't That Terrible this week a sort of certain branch of terrible, which is this week in mainstream media in the US and elsewhere, Nazi propaganda. Where basically it's an unfortunate and inconvenient reality that the Ukrainian army that the US is currently backing right now does have a serious neo-Nazi problem. It's the only army in the world that has a neo-Nazi battalion incorporated into its forces, and that's the Azov battalion, which has in the past received U.S. weapons and training until the House passed amendments to block that. But even that there is not fully successful because it's very hard to control the flow of weapons once they actually reach Ukraine, as anybody knows. So this means for U.S. media tasked with the job of basically whitewashing the Ukrainian military and trying to justify flooding it with more weapons, the presence of Nazis is awkward, and they have to dance around it in very interesting ways, or they just kind of acknowledge it but don't, or they kind of show the Nazis but don't acknowledge that they're Nazis. So, for example, let's go to our first example from the New York Times. So this is a Times update page, what happened on day 18 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it shows 2 Ukrainian soldiers, and you see on their uniforms Azov battalion patches. And of course, no mention is made of what those patches mean, but these are the patches that are inspired from Nazi insignia that come from the Nazi era. And the Azov battalion is openly neo-Nazi. Its founders are neo-Nazi. Some of its members are openly and loudly neo-Nazi. And this speaks to their centrality to the Ukrainian military, that here they are patrolling a town, and here they are being featured in U.S. media. And we just show their insignia and pretend as if there's nothing to be concerned about.
I mean, we've seen this stuff happening with the mayor of a Ukrainian town who had a Stepan Bandera portrait behind him. He's a Nazi collaborator in Ukraine, from Ukraine.
During the Nazi occupation, he was an outright Nazi collaborator, and he was a major inspiration for the far-right nationalist movement inside of Ukraine. In fact, we're going to see another example of that shortly. But let's go to our next clip. Yeah, so this is Nancy Pelosi speaking, introducing Vladimir Zelensky before his address to Congress. And she, if you scroll up a little bit, Dan Cohen will explain, she shouts out Stefan Bandera's Glory to Ukraine slogan, which was popularized during the Second World War by Bandera, a Nazi collaborators group. And now it's repeated today, but that's where it comes from. It's essentially a Nazi collaborator slogan. So let's hear Nancy Pelosi shout it out.
Mr. President, it is my honor to present to you the Congress of the United States, which has great respect and admiration and appreciation for your courageous leadership. Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. Slava Ukraina! Slava Ukraina!
It's Vladimir, by the way. Okay, what's with the shirt?
Glory to heroes.
My colleagues, Slava Ukraina! Slava Ukraina!
So just for good measure, let's do it one more time. Let's shout the Nazi slogan one more time.
Yeah,
Slava Ukraina. It's in the same way that Al-Qaeda was normalized in Syria when that's the side the U.S. was backing. Now it's it's Nazis in Ukraine.
The Banderistas, yeah.
And there's more. We got more examples, plenty more to get to. This is the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany who says this. This is the translation. Stop demonizing the Azov battalion as they are courageous fighters protecting their homeland. And this is playing into Russian propaganda. That is the German ambassador urging people not to criticize the Nazis.
Yeah, you're German ambassador. What are you doing? That's really, I mean, you couldn't get more. That's a great way to undermine. Not all. I mean, look, I'm just saying, have some humility.
In Ukraine, when Joe Biden came to power, Zelensky's government offered what a top Zelensky aide called a welcome gift to the Biden administration, according to Time magazine, by Simon Schuster of Time magazine. And that welcome gift included banning 3 opposition TV networks that were sympathetic to Russia and tied to, pro-Russian oligarchs inside Ukraine. So it took them off of the air, leaving only networks like Ukraine 24 which is owned by one of the country's richest oligarchs. And look at what a Ukraine 24 presenter said this week. I'll translate. I know as a journalist, I have to be objective, I have to be balanced to give you information with a cold heart. But to tell you the truth, it is very difficult to hold on now, especially at such a time. And since we are being called Nazis, fascists anyway, I can allow myself to quote the words of Adolf Eichmann, who said that in order to destroy a nation, it is necessary to destroy, first of all, children. Because after you kill the parents, the children will grow up and will definitely take revenge. By killing children, they will never grow up and the nation will disappear. The armed forces of Ukraine cannot annihilate Russian children because it is prohibited by the rules of war and prohibited by various conventions, including the Geneva Convention. But I'm not from the armed forces of Ukraine, and whenever I get a chance to massacre the Russians, I will definitely do it. Did you call me a Nazi? I adhere to the doctrine of Adolf Eichmann and will do everything in my power to ensure that both you and your children never live on this earth. In order for you to feel how it is when innocent civilians die, in order for you to feel the pain and suffering when you say, and we did not start the war, it was all Putin, we did not start this, we do not want this war. We didn't want the war either, but you must understand that we are talking about the victory of the Ukrainian people, not about peace. We need a victory. And if we have to butcher all your families for this, I will be one of the first to do it. Glory to the nation. And we hope that such a nation as Russia and Russians will never exist on this earth again, because they are just degenerates who are polluting this earth. If Ukrainians have the opportunity, and this is what they're doing now, generally speaking, butchering, cutting, and killing, strangling Muscovites. And I hope that everyone will contribute and kill at least one Muscovite.
Since they're calling me a Nazi anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just going to come out as the Nazi that I am.
Yeah, exactly. Now, obviously, anybody who's living under bombardment, who's being invaded by a foreign country, it's understandable that they're going to be outraged and call for killing their invaders. But this guy is not just calling for killing invading Russian soldiers. He's calling for killing all Russians, including their children. And he's invoking Adolf Eichmann and Nazi ideology to do it.
But is this fake Russian people? I mean, this is so bad.
Yeah.
Like, he's really leaning into the Nazi thing.
He really is.
He adheres to the Eichmann doctrine. He's an Eichmannist.
Yeah.
Adolf Eichmann was a Nazi, by the way, just in case people don't know about this.
And that's why when people talk about a Nazi problem inside Ukraine, again, not all Ukrainians are Nazis. No one suggests that. The vast majority of Ukrainians, of course, reject Nazi ideology. But the point is that there is a contingent inside Ukraine that is influential and powerful, from the armed forces to the media, that does adhere to Nazi ideology. And it's a problem. And for Russian speakers in Ukraine for the last 8 years, it's meant a war on them that has killed over 14,000 people. And that's the war that we're not allowed to acknowledge, because we've been supporting it with billions of dollars in U.S. weapons and blocking a diplomatic solution.
And by the way, I was being a little bit unfair to Eichmann. He was like one of the major organizers of the Holocaust. Not just a Nazi. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, not just a normal Nazi. He was. Yes, of course. So that's isn't that terrible? / this week in.
Isn't that Nazi?
Isn't that Nazi?
We are so excited to bring on our guest, Abby Martin, extremely brave journalist. She has her own show called The Empire Files, which is excellent. She also was on RT, and we're going to talk to her about that and the recent decision by YouTube to remove all of her videos. And she's the director of a great documentary called Gaza Fights for Freedom. Welcome, Abby Martin. Welcome back to Useful Idiots. We're so excited to have you on. So thank you for gracing us with your presence.
I'm so happy to join you guys. Thank you for having me.
So we wanted to start off, there's so much to talk about: Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, Yemen, censorship. But I thought a good place to start would be censorship and the status of all of your episodes of Breaking the Set, which is the show that you had on RT America. Please tell us where people can find those episodes now.
That's a good question, Katie. Luckily, I found out that my mom actually recorded them all. Like every day she recorded the episode on some program on her computer. So I was like, thank God for moms, man, because I don't know where those episodes could be found now. And, just for people who maybe don't understand what happened, like this is the culmination of a years long censorship campaign started with the algorithmic backpaging of alternative media, the acquiescence to the state on behalf of these Silicon Valley giants that tasked themselves with fact-checking and the curation of our reality, that brought us to the point that precipitated this overt, outright ban on all RT programming, the removal of entire libraries of shows, thousands of critical interviews about empire, about the corporate state that we live in. So it was pretty devastating. And even though I think we knew that this was inevitably coming, nothing can really prepare you for that loss. Even if I had a huge archive of all 600 episodes, that was the main vehicle to share all the content, like all of the dead links, all of the community that was a part of that. It's devastating.
Wow.
On your point, Abby, about this being the culmination of a years-long campaign to normalize censorship and to demonize dissenting views, let's put up the tweet, Wilson, of Abby from January 2017, right after this so-called intelligence report from the so-called U.S. intelligence community came out that contained, it was about alleged Russian interference. And this was the report that essentially kicked off, the nonstop Russiagate mania. And it included this lengthy section about RT and specifically singled out Abby's show, Breaking the Set. So Abby tweeted at the time, this is January 2017, official DNI report on Russia says my show Breaking the Set that ended 2 years ago helped cost Hillary the election. And let's click on the screenshot. RT introduced 2 new shows, Breaking the Set on 4th September and Truth Seeker on 2nd November. But again, this is years ago. Mm-hmm. Both overwhelmingly focused on criticism of U.S. and Western governments, as well as the promotion of radical discontent. From August to November 2012, RT ran numerous reports on alleged U.S. election fraud and voting machine vulnerabilities, contending that U.S. election results cannot be trusted and do not reflect the popular will. So this so-called intelligence report really was essentially like a, high school, maybe university level media critique that singled out your show, Abby, and it set the stage for everything that followed. I mean, I don't know what you thought back then, what was going to come next, but you rightfully pointed out at the time how insane it was that the U.S. intelligence community was doing analysis of your show and somehow tying that to Hillary Clinton losing the election.
It was a fascinating moment because, for months and months, we'd been hearing that Russian propaganda, this, basically this diagnosis that Russian propaganda did this, right? Like it brought us Donald Trump. And it was really shocking as someone who'd worked for RT for so long and kind of knowing the minimal impact actually that the network did have. Very few watchers, and I knew obviously this talking point was completely false and they were greatly exaggerating the impact of Russian propaganda, but nothing could prepare me for the actual report because I thought they'd actually put a little bit more into it. And it really did seem like a cursory attempt, a 2-hour job from some intern at the Atlantic Council throwing together this haphazard analysis that was supposed to be the end all be all of how Russian propaganda did this, sowed the seeds for the loss of Hillary Clinton. And as you rightly pointed out, I mean, it really is nothing more than talking about how we aired grievances and issues that exist, right? These deep divisions that essentially were exploited by the sinister Kremlin operation. Really what RT America did and it was just a network that filled a gaping hole left by the corporate media's institutional failures. And, cynically or not, this was what the network did. It uplifted fringe voices from across the political spectrum for better or worse. And I would argue for better. A lot of people who were really prominent anti-war dissidents were given platforms that they would never be given anywhere else. And when you look at this analysis from the intelligence community, it really does reveal what the threat of RT really was. The threat was that these marginalized and oppressed voices were given platforms. And these issues that are forbidden viewpoints, like fracking, amazingly was in the report, third-party candidates talking about anti-capitalist views and highlighting things like socialism, that was the threat.
And by the way, there was far more diversity of opinion on RT than in any U.S. Private network. I remember when Russia took Crimea back in 2014, you called that out on the air. You protested that. You said you disagreed with that. imagine a major U.S. cable host on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News voicing that level of dissent when it comes to a major U.S. military operation. You barely see it. So even the allegation that RT was always just promoting the Russian narrative is just completely false. And on that point, I wanted to ask you, I mean, were you ever pressured over what your editorial line was when you were at RT for doing hundreds of episodes?
No, and that's what's so amazing about this whole thing. It's actually the opposite of this cartoonish depiction of this Putin top-down propaganda network. It was really hands-off. It was a lot of really well-intentioned journalists just wanting to do really good work. And a lot of the successes of RT were almost despite management because of the hands-off attitude and a lot of this stuff. A lot of my colleagues, really incredible reporting came out of that network, Aaron. And my whole show at Breaking the Set, I was never told anything at all. In fact, the day that I felt uncomfortable with my position at the network and wanted to distinguish myself from the editorial line for the first time, in that moment that troops were amassing at the border of Crimea, I thought, look, I feel strongly about this and I want to distinguish my voice. And I felt uncomfortable for the first time just with the entire editorial line. For the first time, I felt like it was reflecting the Russian state, which is obvious. It's in the name. The bias is very clear. And my boss was like, look, if you feel strongly about this, then say whatever you want to say. Because I even said, look, I'm willing to walk out the door if you don't let me have control over this. And he was like, go for it. And it wasn't just that one remark. It wasn't just this token statement that proved that RT had editorial freedom. I talked about Ukraine and Crimea for months and months after that. There were several debates that we had also about Syria before that. My producer, Manny, brought up the Russian role in the Syria war. There was so much nuance and complexities with our coverage. And it is just completely offensive that people take this line about the network with really never having watched the programming, Aaron.
And the story is often told as you spoke out against Crimea and then you were fired. The truth is, though, you spoke out against Crimea and then you continued working there?
I continued working there for almost a year. The only reason that I left was purely personal differences and a managerial, conflict. It had nothing to do with the politics at all. In fact, after I said what I did, there's a really fascinating thing that happened. I don't know if I could tell this story really quickly because I think it speaks a lot to how much they want to control and undermine RT's legitimacy. Right after I spoke out, I was given this international platform. Mind you, when I said what I did, I didn't think anything would happen. I just did it because I have moral consistency. I didn't think that overnight I would be like plastered on the front pages of every fucking newspaper in the world. Like, it was really an open invitation to join any corporate media outlet and just say your piece. Because I was the anti-Russia hero and dissident on Russian-backed media. Quickly, I realized that I was being used by Western propaganda, so I flipped the script and tried to explain that they were part of the problem. They were warmongering, fear-mongering, complicit in all of this, and it quickly became unuseful. And so, of course, I became fully exposed and I started to be called a conspiracy theorist. They actually posited that I was a false flag on behalf of Russia to claim that the network had legitimacy, that they were propping me up as their pawn. It was very fascinating.
To suggest that there was a kind of tolerance for dissent that there wasn't.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And so the next day, a colleague of mine who was totally apolitical, never had an opinion. She was just a script reader reading anchor. And she had told me before that a Daily Beast journalist named Jamie Kirchick, who's basically also a pawn of Bill Kristol, the famous Iraq war architect. He worked at his think tank called FPI, the Foreign Policy Initiative in DC. She told me that this journalist had been hounding her for months to try to quit RT and do a big tell-all about the network, and he would get her a job. Like, he would secure a better job for her. And she was like, I really hate my job. I've been wanting to leave for a long time. She was working there for like 3 years before this happened. And I was like, well, why would you do that? You're going to throw all of your work under the bus and also all of your colleagues. Like, don't do that. That's a really shitty idea. This guy's using you. So next thing you know that happened, she resigns live on air. I can't stand for this Kremlin-funded propaganda network. And then she just immediately has this giant media tour lined up for her, a big tell-all in the Daily Beast. And what you saw come out after that, according to Max Blumenthal and Rania Kalik in Truth Dig, is that neoconservatives stage managed the entire resignation for their own gain and to undermine my attempt to prove my own editorial freedom, which, as you say, Aaron, is kind of startling, the fact that at this alleged propaganda network. I was able to do what I did and pave that editorial freedom for months that followed. This wasn't just a one-off. And really you have to ask yourself, why is it that these people who become dutiful stenographers for the foreign policy establishment, whenever there's anything happening, the Venezuela coup, the assassination of General Soleimani, or right now the war in Ukraine, why is it that they can't pave their own editorial freedom and put their jobs on the line if they disagree? And the answer is that they either can't, in the likes of Phil Donahue, Cenk Uygur, Jesse Ventura, or that they don't want to because they believe in the messaging that they're presenting. And either way, I think it's a stark indictment of our media system today.
Yeah, Phil Donahue was famously taken off of the air at MSNBC in the run-up to the Iraq War, not because his ratings were low, his ratings were actually pretty high, but because the network, as we found out from leaked memos, didn't want his anti-war message on air, didn't fit in with their brand. And Jesse Ventura was like, signed a deal with MSNBC, and then he was paid a severance not to go on air because they realized that he was going to be anti-war, and that sent a message. It sends a message when that happens that if you're going to dissent from the party line, then you'll be canceled, and people follow suit. I had forgotten that the RT resignation you talked about was followed your act of dissent. So it's such a funny story. You have a genuine act of dissent. And because it doesn't go the way neocons want it, they orchestrate an on-air resignation. And Jamie Kirchick, you mentioned, he's talked about wanting to make it so that nobody feels comfortable ever working at RT. And if you do work at RT, that you never work in this town again. That's essentially what his agenda was. And no surprise that he played a role in that stunt.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to make it so that you were a pariah. And basically they did. I mean, the FAR registration, the sinister labeling of Russian media, it made it untenable to even be a journalist there. It was impossible to book interviews. And then, of course, inevitably, they had to shutter its doors, I'm assuming, because of the ruble's collapse or sanctions. But I don't think anyone actually knows yet what happened.
We actually have the video, Wilson. I just put it in the chat if you want to look at the Liz Wall video. I think it's really instructive because you see her checking her notes. Like it's I feel bad for her. She's so clearly not being authentic. Like it's clear that she's checking her notes, basically, like not speaking from the heart.
A dramatic move today by an anchor for the network Russia Today America. Her name is Liz Wall. She's an American who works in the Russia Today America's Washington bureau. She accused her employer of glossing over the actions of Vladimir Putin in Crimea, and then on the air, she quit. Take a look.
I cannot be part of a network funded by the Russian government that whitewashes the actions of Putin. I'm proud to be an American and believe in disseminating the truth, and that is why, after this newscast, I'm resigning.
Liz Wall joins us now. This is her first TV interview since quitting RT America. Also, Jill Doherty's back with us. She'll also be asking questions. Liz, it's good to have you on the program. Obviously, your announcement stunned a lot of people. Why did you decide to resign during your newscast? Because you've been working there for like 2.5 years. Clearly, you're familiar with the perspective of RT America, the kind of stuff, the kind of stories they put on the air. So why today?
Why today? That's a good question. I think the coverage, I mean, as we're in this diplomatic standoff and during the escalation of this crisis in Crimea, I think the propagandist nature of RT came out in full force. Today, for example, I had an interview with Ron Paul. The only question that I asked, I asked many questions. I asked about the Russian intervention. You know, he has a very anti-intervention approach. I asked him in the wake of escalation by the Russian military, how long, you know, how should we respond to this? How should the U.S. respond to this? And that question was cut out of the interview. There was another segment today. It was a news package from one of our correspondents that painted the opposition over there in the Ukraine as having neo-Nazi elements. And I think that's very dangerous when you have a new government instability over there. And I'm sure that there are, in fact, neo-Nazi elements, but to portray the entire opposition as being part of this right-wing extremist group is going along with the narrative that Vladimir Putin wants to go along with.
Was this something you had always felt pressure? I mean, how does it work at RT? Where did directions come from?
The direction comes from management, and I think there's a lot of young people that work there, some people inexperienced, and I think that they're eager to please management. There's a form of self-censorship that you learn. Eventually, you learn what management likes, what management dislikes. Today, especially with the heightened situation in Crimea, overtly questions are being written. That very, very loaded questions basically to paint the picture and to present the Putin perspective in all of this. And I just think, I mean, I would hope as a reporter and in life, you should always seek the truth, spread the truth, disseminate the truth. And what's clear is what's happening right now amid this crisis is that RT is not about the truth. It's about promoting a Putinist agenda. And I can tell you firsthand, it's also about bashing America.
That was so read off of her notes.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad. I could have just coached her to do better. She just had to memorize. She had one job.
One job,
you know what I mean?
Dude.
Which is like to look like you believe the shit you're saying.
Yeah, you should. There's a better interview almost with her with Neil Cavuto, where Neil Cavuto is just like, so who do you want a job with? And she's like, I'll take a job with anyone.
Yeah,
she's like, I'd love a job with CNN.
She's like, yeah. No, he's like, MSNBC. She's like, maybe. CNN, yes.
Yes,
and he's like,
CNN.
What job offers have you gotten? She's like, I don't know. I can't remember. I don't know.
Or Jamie promised her a job and she never materialized.
Yeah, she ran for Congress apparently. I don't know what's happened.
Yeah,
she worked for Newser.
I mean, the sad thing about it is that because propaganda is so, like, you don't even really need to try. Like, very few people know even about this. And I think the majority of people now conflate me with her, and they just think that, oh my God, these anchors resigned because they were disgusted with Russian propaganda. And even like it worked so well. She went on the Colbert Report. Like, she was a superstar for a week because she gave them exactly what they wanted.
Abby, you opened the doors that she could then go through. Without you speaking truth to power, she could never have pretended to speak truth to power. And pretended to have something interesting and important to say.
I mean, if she had any brains at all, she would know that that's kryptonite for any news organization. You don't resign live and throw your entire job under the bus. Like,
exactly.
Jamie forgot to tell her that part.
When she's like, I'm proud to be American, it's like,
I'm proud to be. She's patriotic. I mean, she really. Patriotic. And I like how she was just like, it's a Putinist agenda. Like, what?
No, not a Putin. She's like, it's a
Vladimir
Putinist agenda. Looks down at her notes. For people who are just listening, there's a lot of looking down on her to the right of her bottom right. Yeah.
That's what's so funny about it. It's like, it's called Russia Today.
Yeah,
that's why people were like, did you just find out what the RT stood for?
I know. That's like, you're proud to be an American? Like, I mean, there's this whole subversive argument. You could say you're proud to be an American, which makes you an internationalist. Fine. But like, she's clearly not like, she was just reading lines there. And reading lines once again in her.
I know. It's so sad. It's so sad, but it worked. And the stunt worked.
It did work. And it speaks how cynical these neocons are. They'll exploit anything and they'll exploit anyone, even, getting someone to basically throw away their career just for a stunt that serves their agenda in the moment, which itself comes from this like maniacal desire to counter the impact of your dissent and your dissent not going the way they wanted.
Not fitting into the neocon narrative, or nationalistic, jingoistic narrative. Because when you went on NPR, right, you said to NPR that they got funding from questionable sources, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about how you leveraged your opportunities and also how they responded to it when you brought that stuff up?
Yeah, because really quickly it was just like, how was it to work for this overt propaganda network? And I was just like, look, every media organization that has questionable funding is propaganda in one form or another. So let's be honest about that. And let's talk about the funding that goes into NPR and how that affects your reporting. Do you self-censor about the BP oil spill? Just straight up, it was like very uncomfortable from the get because it was uncomfortable to remind these people that they are also participating in the exact same stuff. It's like, at least I can navigate the bias of my network. It's very obvious. I don't know if how Pfizer is affecting your reporting about COVID. How is, Lockheed Martin affecting your reporting about Ukraine? It's like very, very insidious. And when I went on Piers Morgan, I mean, it was the same kind of thing. I was just like, MSNBC and CNN are way more responsible, actually, not as responsible, way more responsible for setting the stage for this potential conflict to break out. And it's really, really damaging. And I also brought up the fact that corporate media is controlled by 5 corporations, and it's a huge problem. And so I just was only given like a couple minutes before I was cut. I actually did an interview with BBC too that was never aired, because I brought up, why aren't they, lambasted as being state-funded propaganda? So it was just very funny the way that it unfolded. And then you saw them actually smearing me as a lunatic conspiracy theorist, right? So then they had to basically just character assassinate me, because they didn't know what to do with me at that point.
Right. It's like RT is called RT, which used to stand for Russia Today, but NPR is not called like BP Today.
Yeah.
Right? Like what you can look for, or what biases to look for with RT. You don't when it's corporate, like sponsorship that's in the shadows. You don't have your guard up to know.
Exactly. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, I mean, this is a bit different, but a similar theme of, if you remember that the young Syrian child, Alan Kurdi, whose picture, washed up on a shore in the Mediterranean, trying to flee Syria. And his aunt, Tima Kurdi, went on MSNBC once, and they expected her to basically spout the regime change narrative for Syria. We have to flood Syria with more weapons, support the moderate rebels, basically destroy the country in the name of democracy. And she didn't. She called out the US for backing sectarian death squads in Syria, and said that like treating Syria as this battleground for all these different states was destroying Syria and leading to the deaths of people like Alan Kurdi. And so she was on MSNBC. She said that, never heard from on corporate media ever again. She's not useful to the narrative. So even though she's the aunt of this young boy who lost his life, she was never welcome back again, because just her narrative wasn't convenient.
That's absolutely just disgusting. It makes me fucking sick to hear that, because it's like, I'm one thing, but this is a woman of a dead child who was exploited and weaponized around the world. And it's like, you don't want to hear from the mother? You should be ashamed.
The aunt,
Or the aunt. My God. It reminds me of this God, we can go to Ukraine, but the most horrific thing I've seen out of Ukraine so far is actually the massacre done by the insurgent side. Of course, not to say that there aren't war crimes being committed everywhere and heinous atrocities happening, but it's like, this isn't useful for the West to show that the people that we're putting weapons in the hands of are also committing atrocities.
Yeah, the ones that we're actually directly arming, that's not convenient for us to talk about. The ones that we have direct control over.
Oh, God, you guys, it's just the most depressing thing to think that World War III is actually based on what our politicians are going to decide to do.
And to hear the rest of the interview, please go to usefulidiots.substack.com.
Well, listen, a very positive thing, Abby, is all the work you and Mike Prez do. So how can people follow you and the Empire Files?
Check us out on Empire. I don't want to even say YouTube anymore. Just check us out on, at this point, it's really sad that I have to say this, but like, we all have to survive under capitalism. So I honestly, I'm just going to start saying, follow us on Patreon. I mean, we really have all of our content for free. The only thing we have behind paywalls is a couple podcasts, but it really does help you guys, because at this point we have to just follow the journalists that we know that we can trust. And that means you guys, and the pool is dwindling, but like, we have to survive in the model that we live in. And that's going to take everyone. I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but you can follow us at Patreon, the Empire Files. Of course, I host a podcast with my brother called Media Roots Radio. You can follow that on all podcast platforms, and check out Earth's Greatest Enemy. It's going to be a doozy.
And what's the website for that again?
earthsgreatestenemy.com.
Awesome. I'm really excited. Gaza Fights for Freedom is so great. All the work that you guys do is so great. So I encourage everyone to follow you.
It's sad, Katie. I was looking at that photo of us at the New York screening of Gaza Fights for Freedom, and Michael Brooks was just there in the background, and life is just so fleeting, and it's a lot, you guys. And I know it's like a really dark time, but I wish I had some positive words to close us out. But like, just hug your friends and family while we're all still here, you guys. It's a really hard time, and hopefully we can pressure our government to step back and de-escalate. And that's really all we can do is try to inject some sanity in this conversation, because the propaganda is stronger than it ever has been.
That was great. Abby Martin, great as always.
Abby is stellar. She's a force for good. Everybody check her out. The Empire Files. Always great to talk to her.
Yes, so great to talk to her. And also make sure that you join our Substack this week if you're not already a member. And if you are a member, thank you, and stay joined. We have an extended interview with Abby Martin, and we have an update, a Young Turks versus Aaron Mate update for you.
They're after me again, everybody.
They're after him again.
The Turks are after me again.
The Turks.
And this is where, on our Substack only feed, I get to make fun of them.
Yeah.
So follow us along there if you want to see the latest.
So we will be seeing you on Monday morning. That's at 10 a.m. on youtube.com/usefulidiots. Make sure you subscribe to us there on YouTube. We'll be doing our regular Monday morning live stream where we react to the Sunday morning shows that we watch so that you don't have to. Then you can catch us on Call-In at 11 a.m. And then we'll be releasing our formerly paywalled extended interview with Oliver Stone, who is the subject of more headlines, once again, because the documentary that he produced, Ukraine on Fire, has been removed by YouTube. Luckily, you can still find it now on Rumble. And we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Hello, thank you so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For full episodes and extended interviews, please subscribe at usefulidiots.substack.com. You can subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/usefulidiots for clips, live streams, and full episodes. Also, subscribe to us wherever you find your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod and use the hashtag UsefulIdiotsPod. Join us Mondays at 10 a.m. for the Useful Idiots Monday Morning Show, where we discuss the Sunday morning news shows so you don't have to watch them.